I got a letter from the HOA, the homeowners association of my new neighborhood. It looked official, printed on crisp white paper with the HOA's logo at the top. But what it said hit me like a slap to the face. I was being fined $2,000. The reason? Fishing. No, you didn't mishear that. I was fined $2,000, just for dropping a fishing line into the community pond. The very pond that was shown to me as a highlighted amenity when I bought the house. And no, I didn't fight back because of the money. I fought back because something about this felt wrong. Deeply wrong. If you've ever thought that one ordinary person can't challenge a corrupt system, this story might make you think again. When I moved away from the chaos of the city, I was chasing peace. A quiet life. Morning breezes, fresh air, birdsong, and a small, still pond right in the center of the neighborhood. A place where I could fish, read, or just breathe. Everything in the neighborhood brochure painted the picture of a dream. And on my very first week living there, I did just that. I woke up early, grabbed my old fishing rod and a mug of hot coffee, and walked to the pond. The air was cool, the mist still floating over the water, and sunlight danced through the trees. I cast my line, took a deep breath, and smiled to myself. This is it, I thought. This is the life I've been searching for. But a week later, that letter showed up at my door. According to GA, I had violated community regulations by fishing in a restricted area, and now owed $2,000. I was stunned. There were no signs, no warning, nothing. The pond was clearly listed as a shared community amenity. No one ever said fishing was prohibited, let alone that it could cost me thousands of dollars. I assumed it had to be a mistake. So I called the HOA office. Their response: the rule is clear. Karen will handle your violation file. Karen, I had never met her, but even her name felt like a warning label. You've seen the memes. The Karen stereotype, always meddling, always right, always calling the manager over the smallest inconvenience. I never believed those jokies until now. So I knocked on her door, not to beg, but to understand. To find out what the hell was going on. What I didn't realize was that the moment that door opened, I was stepping into something far darker than a neighborhood dispute. I was walking straight into a maze of control, fear, and power. And I had just become part of a war no one else dared to fight. From the outside, Karen's house looked like something out of a real estate magazine. Perfectly trimmed hedges. A lawn so green it looked artificial. The American flag hung at the perfect angle from the porch. But behind that picturesque exterior was the gatekeeper of a mini kingdom. And I was about to knock. I rang the bell. She answered within seconds, as if she had been standing behind the door waiting. Karen was in her 50s, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun that probably hadn't moved since 2007, wearing a blazer on a Saturday. Her eyes scanned me like a barcode. Or Mr. Thompson, I presume, she said with a smirk. I've been expecting you. Most violators show up within 24 hours of getting the letter, thinking they can argue their way out. Let me save you some time. The fine stands. She crossed her arms. The pond is under the HOA's direct oversight. Fishing disrupts the ecosystem. We've worked very hard to maintain it. I tried to stay calm. Actually, Karen, I said, pulling a document from my folder, according to county records, the pond and a 15-foot perimeter around it are classified as a public access easement. That means it's not actually under the HOA's jurisdiction. She didn't blink. I don't care what the county says. She snapped. The board voted to take full control of that area 3 years ago. Can I see the minutes from that meeting? I asked. Her lips twitched. They're in the files. I don't owe you anything. And frankly, if you don't like how this community is run, you can always move. She slammed the door. And that's when I realized this wasn't about a pond, or fishing, or some misunderstood rule. This was about power. About one woman who had built herself an empire, and ruled it with absolute authority. And like all empires built on fear and unchecked power, it was just waiting to fall. As I walked back down the street, I passed neighbors watering lawns, walking dogs trimming already perfect flower beds. No one made eye contact, until George. George lived 3 doors down. Retired, kind eyes, the kind of guy who still read the paper front to back. He leaned in and whispered like we were in some kind of spy movie. You're the new guy who got fined for fishing. Right? I nodded. He looked around and lowered his voice further. Karen's been doing this for years. Johnson's got fined $500 because their trash cans were out 12 minutes too long. The Paddles, $1,000 for their daughter drawing chalk art on their driveway. People just pay. It's easier. But it's not legal. I said. George gave me a look that said, that doesn't matter here. Her brother, in-law's a lawyer, he said. She handpicked the board. No one questions her. And if you do, your mailbox is suddenly 1 inch too tall. Or your lawn's a little too wild. Trust me, son, just pay the fine. But paying had never been my style. That night, I started digging municipal codes, easement laws, HOA bylaws, and what I found was just the beginning. It started with curiosity. But within 48 hours that curiosity turned into a mission. Not just to argue with an overzealous neighbor, but to expose a broken power structure hiding behind picket fences and manicured lawns. I spent an entire night at my computer, eyes locked on every line of the HOA handbook I received when I bought the house. I read through clauses about fence height, garbage bin placement times, even the proved color of window shutters. But nowhere, absolutely nowhere, did it mention a ban on fishing. Then I accessed the county's public easement records, a legal database that shows land rights and access. My heart skipped a beat when I found it a development map from 1997, with the community pond clearly labeled as a public access easement. That meant residents had the legal right to use it for recreational purposes, including fishing. The HOA had no legal authority to restrict it. I knew I needed more than just documents, I needed voices. So, I started digging online. Facebook groups, Reddit threads, old neighborhood forums. That's when I found a comment buried in a 2021 thread from a former resident. Karen was investigated for misusing HOA funds before she moved to Willowbrook. The whole thing got buried. I messaged the poster, a woman named Linda. To my surprise, she replied within hours. And what she told me chilled me to the bone. She ran our HOA for 6 years, put in ridiculous rules, diverted pool maintenance funds to build a mini golf patch in front of her house. When people pushed back, she called them community threats. Then one day, she just resigned and vanished. Next time I saw her name, it was in a listing for a house at Willowbrook Estates. Karen wasn't just a difficult personality. She was a serial manipulator, exploiting HOA systems wherever she went, building empires of control and using community funds like her personal piggy bank. I decided it was time to go full throttle. I submitted a public records request to the HOA, demanding the meeting minutes from the supposed vote where they took control of the pond. Legally, they had 10 days to respond. Meanwhile, I began walking door to door, speaking with residents. One man said he got fined for leaving his car in his driveway for 20 minutes. A young couple was ordered to remove a front yard swing because it wasn't aesthetically consistent. But the scariest part wasn't the absurdity of the rules. It was how everyone stayed silent. They knew it was wrong. They had seen the unfairness. But one by one, they chose to keep their heads down, out of fear, exhaustion, or the simple belief that there's nothing one person can do. That was the moment I realized if I didn't do something, no one would. The next morning, I started printing documents, easement maps, highlighted regulations, statements from neighbors. I wasn't just going to file a complaint. I was going to deliver the truth, house by house. Because sometimes, all it takes to shake an empire built on fear is a letter. And someone who refuses to shut up. Karen thought I'd stay quiet, just like all the other residents she had fined for grass too long, or a mailbox, not the exact shade of HOA black. But I wasn't like them. I didn't move into this suburban haven to be bullied by someone who mistook a blazer and a title for a crown. I printed over 80 packets. Every shred of evidence I'd collected, the county's public records showing the pond was a public easement, HOA bylaws with no mention of fishing restrictions, stories from previous residents who had experienced Karen's power plays, and testimonies from current neighbors who had stayed silent for too long. Each packet was neatly bound in a red folder, with a bold headline on the cover, EntitledPeople OA abused rules, illegal fines and Karen. I didn't email them, I delivered them by hand. Some doors opened hesitantly. Some people peeked through the blinds and pretended not to be home. But then there were people like George, the man who told me about the chalk fine. He looked at me, then at the packet, then gave me a slow, meaningful nod. "I'll read it," he said quietly. "And if there's a meeting, I'll be there." I didn't expect the whole neighborhood to rise up overnight. But I knew then. The spark had been lit. At the same time, I filed formal complaints with the city's code enforcement office, the local planning department, and most importantly, the state's HOA oversight division. I included evidence of scanned documents, time-stamped photos of the real signage, or lack thereof, and a response from the county confirming the pond was not under exclusive HOA control. Still, I knew the moment Karen found out, she wouldn't stay silent. Sure enough, the next morning at exactly 7 a.m., a furious pounding rattled my front door, making me spill my coffee, and there she was, Karen. Her face was beet red, her bun tight as ever, but it couldn't hide the storm brewing behind her eyes. "You think you're clever," she hissed, stepping forward. "Spreading lies, handing out trash to my community. You have no idea who you're messing with." I calmly raised my phone, already recording. "Are you threatening me, Karen?" I asked, my voice even. She froze for half a second. Then, "I'm reminding you that multiple violations can rack up real fast. I'll fine you for disturbing the peace, for improperly trimmed grass, for a mailbox hinge out of spec 4. I didn't reply. Just let the camera roll. She stormed off eventually. But I knew this was far from over. That evening, a bright red flyer appeared on the neighborhood bulletin board. Emergency HOA meeting. Agenda. Resident Thompson and internal disruption. And make no mistake, this was Karen's counterattack. I was prepared. But what I didn't expect was that this night, in that crowded meeting hall, everything was about to change. When I walked into the room, it was already packed. Familiar faces from neighbors who had once avoided eye contact were now sitting upright, alert, some even hopeful. But among them were 3 unfamiliar faces: a representative from the city code enforcement office, a county official, and a man in a gray shirt with no name tag, whom I would later learn was from the Economic Crimes Division. Karen stepped up to the podium like she was still in control, her hand raised for silence, and though her voice was clear, it lacked its usual smug confidence. We are here tonight to address the dangerous smear campaign being led by one of our newest residents, Mr. Thompson. His false allegations have damaged the integrity of this board. I move that we fine him to the fullest extent. She didn't get to finish. The city official stood up, calm but firm. Actually, Ms. Karen, we're here tonight to address the complaints filed against you and this board. Our preliminary findings suggest serious irregularities in your enforcement practices and financial management. Silence fell over the room like a wave. Karen froze. But the county official didn't stop. He opened a folder and began listing findings. The pond in question has been public access land since 1997, per city records. No valid HOA meeting minutes support the claim that the board ever assumed exclusive control over the pond. The $2,000 fishing fine was unlawful. And most importantly, there was evidence of over $50,000 in HOA funds misused for non-authorized purposes. Each word landed like a hammer blow on the fragile structure Karen had built for years. Neighbors whispered. Linda, the woman fined for parking 1 foot over her driveway, gasped. A young couple looked at each other and nodded. The tide was turning. Karen's voice cracked. This is all a misunderstanding. Everything I've done was for the community's good. Her eyes darted wildly. But nobody came to her defense. Then it was my turn. I didn't speak long. I simply stepped forward, holding up a USB drive containing evidence, falsified meeting minutes, shady invoices, questionable transfers. I turned to the city rep. I believe this is enough for you to take it from here. He nodded, pulling out an official-looking document with a seal. Karen, based on our investigation, you are hereby fined 10 Zawalosan for violations of municipal code, unauthorized enforcement actions, and abuse of HOA authority. A full audit of the HOA finances will follow. We suggest you seek legal counsel. Karen's face went ghost white. No one stood to defend her. Even the board members she had hand-picked sat silently, calculating their own risk. A vote was held right then and there. Result unanimous. Karen was removed from her position effective immediately. She stepped down from the podium stunned. As she passed me, the once cold stare was now hollow. I didn't feel triumphant, just relieved. Finally, justice had a voice. As Karen stepped down from the podium, the room remained cloaked in tense silence. But it wasn't the silence of fear anymore, it was the silence of realization. A collective awareness spreading through the room, they were no longer under her control. Karen walked slowly toward the exit, her shoulders heavy, as if carrying the ruins of a crumbling empire. But before she crossed the threshold, she turned back and looked directly at me. It wasn't the angry, vengeful stare I expected. No, her eyes were hollow, almost lost. As if she couldn't believe that everything she had built, or rather manipulated, had unraveled in a single evening. Outside the hall, a light rain had started to fall. Karen got into her car, shut the door and drove off in silence. No one saw her out, no one said goodbye. Inside, the air broke open with relief. An elderly man sitting in the back chuckled softly. A woman hugged a stack of refund forms like it was the deed to her freedom. Neighbors who had once looked down in submission now stood tall, as if a weight they hadn't realized they were carrying had been lifted. But I knew. This wasn't the end. What followed was a months-long investigation. Authorities combed through every HOA account, every receipt, every forgotten meeting note, every threatening letter. And one by one, residents began to share their own stories. The man living near the tennis courts revealed Karen had once fined him for unauthorized soil modification when he tried to replace an old tree in his yard. A young mother tearfully recounted being forced to scrub her daughter's chalk drawings off their driveway because Karen claimed they were aesthetic disturbances. My story had lit a match. What followed was a wildfire. The HOA board, now free of Karen's grip, held transparent elections. For the first time in years, people felt that their voices mattered. A month later, I received a letter. But this one wasn't a fine. It was an invitation. The new board wanted me to become an honorary advisor, helping ensure nothing like this could happen again. I declined. I hadn't moved here to fight battles. I moved here for peace. For quiet mornings by the pond, with a fishing rod in hand and a warm coffee by my side. And now, finally, I could have that. That morning, the lake mirrored a cloudless sky, calm and still as if nothing had ever disturbed it. I sat on the familiar wooden bench, my fishing rod resting gently in the water. There were no suspicious footsteps behind me, no envelopes with fines, and the name Karen had faded into a distant memory. I watched the ripples dance across the surface and thought back to everything that had happened. It all began with a simple fishing trip, a peaceful morning ritual, and turned into a battle against a broken system. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just an ordinary person, like anyone else who decided not to back down. Change doesn't always begin with grand revolutions. Sometimes it begins with one person who says, enough. Now, each morning, I fish without fear. No more side eyes from neighbors, no more threats. Instead, there are nods, friendly waves, and the kind of quiet solidarity that only comes after a storm has passed. If you're listening to this and thinking, I'm just one person, what could I possibly change? Remember, this one person, at the right moment, can shift an entire community. Be that person. Don't stay silent in the face of injustice, because if you don't speak up, there will always be another Karen, ready to take power and use it the wrong way. And me, I'm still here by the water, casting my line, breathing in the morning air, smiling, because I know, this time, I've truly come home. If you've made it this far, then this wasn't just a story you listened to. It was something you felt. Maybe because somewhere in your life, you've encountered a Karen. Someone who abused their power, made you feel small, or acted like the rules didn't apply to them. If you believe that truth deserves to be heard, that justice should never stay buried, then don't let this story end here. Hit that like button if this journey struck a chord with you. Leave a comment. What do you think about Karen? Have you ever been in a similar situation? I want to hear your story, your voice. Share this video with friends, family, or anyone you know living under unfair rules or facing silent oppression. You might just give someone the courage they need to speak up. And please, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Because this isn't just another storytelling channel. It's a place for truth, for defiance, and for reminding everyday people that they can stand up and win. Thanks for staying until the end. I'll see you in the next one.